Good evening, and thank you for joining me for what my husband is very supportively calling my difficult second album. In recognition of that, and because we only have about 45 minutes, I thought it would be best to, pick something simple and neat and really contained. So welcome to Changing the World. Stay with me, folks, we've got this. And it was a pen that 5 years ago changed my world. Let me recreate the experience for you. If you could just follow the pen here, yeah, and then there, yeah. Yes, you have multiple sclerosis. Well, Dr. B, I don't want to denigrate your very technical Bic biro, but would it be okay if we just double checked with that fancy MRI machine? He huffs. A deep belly, you may as well just rolled your eyes in my face. Huff. If we must, but it won't change the diagnosis. In the meantime, I'll get the nurse to book you in to discuss your options. Read the materials she gives you, then email me your choice of drug. Excuse me? My choice of drug? Don't you recommend the drug? No, I don't do drug discussions. Sensing my growing irritation and wonderment at what he does actually do then, and perhaps remembering that this is a private consultation and he's going to invoice me £200 for the pleasure of this conversation, Dr. B decides to work his value proposition by throwing in a freebie. I notice your husband isn't with you today. You should be aware that after a diagnosis like this, most marriages will, within 2 years, end in divorce. It's an unnecessary buy one, get one free. I feel a bog off in every sense. So what's your advice then, Doc? What do I do now? The key, Mrs. Young, is to not get emotional. See the nurse, choose the drug, then forget about it. Just carry on living your life until something bad happens. Then call me. The key is to not get emotional. So says Dr. B, and right enough, emotions are tricky things. But when it comes to changing the world, they are the only things that will unlock the path. Unfortunately, it's not the good ones, because I don't know anyone apart from software engineers who sit back and go, wow, this is working great. How can we update and change it? So we're left with the so-called bad ones. The ones our parents tried to shield us from. Pain, upset, despair, depression, loneliness, and rage. These strong emotions are our compass. My favourite is anger. And so when looking for a place to start changing the world, I suggest looking towards the issues that the brilliant comedian Sarah Millican would say, boil your piss. And there's something that gets my urinary tract fired up in a way that no amount of cranberry juice can solve. Fairy tales. You know, the ones we were told as children and the ones we continue to tell our kids. Gather around, little ones, gather in. Let me tell you a story. In a land not too far away, in an old, cold, creaky courtroom with dark oak panels that climb like ivy up the walls, tales are being told to a jury of 12. Mr. Beauty is in the witness box and Mr. Charming, the doc. That a fight took place, they both agree, but why and how and who is at fault? Mr. Charming's barrister rises slowly from her wooden bench and begins to spin his version of events. Mr. Beauty, can you begin by describing your movements on the evening of Friday, 14th of February? And as you gathered with your friends at Mr. Riding's house, can you describe what you did, please? Mainly drinking and playing computer games. What were those drinks? Just beer? Can you remember what the beer was called? I understand it was many months ago. Mr. Riding testified earlier that he had just taken delivery of a crate of Brewdog beer. Does that sound right to you? Good, good. And can you remember anything about the particular beer you were drinking, the name or the colour of the label perhaps? A blue label and something about the sea. Your Honour, if I may, can I ask the witness to turn to image 3 in the evidence folder? Mr. Beauty, Is this the beer you and your friends were drinking that night? It is. Would it surprise you to know that this beer, Brewdog's Sink the Bismarck, contains 41% alcohol by volume? To put that into context, that puts this beer in the same league as hard spirits, like whiskey. So you and your friends have gathered together preparing for a night out on the town and have begun to drink high-strength beer whilst playing computer games. What computer game were you playing? For the benefit of the jury, Mortal Kombat 11 is a fighting game in which characters can be customized with different fighting skills. It is extremely violent, being suitable for over 18s only, and has, amongst other features, what the creators call stages of brutalities and fatalities, with hyper-realistic graphics that will, and I quote directly from their advertising, showcase every skull-shattering, eye-popping moment, bringing you so close to the fight, you can feel it. Mr. Beauty, I'd like to briefly take you back to the afternoon of that day. Where were you prior to arriving at Mr. Riding's house? The gym? What sort of gym? A boxing gym. How long were you at this fighter's gym for? 3 hours. Gosh, that's quite some dedication. Is that usual for you? I see. You fight regularly in amateur bouts. How long have you been doing that for? 6 years. You're quite the experienced fighter then. And were you training for anything in particular? Nothing? That sounds unusual for a man with a history of regular amateur competition. Your scheduled fight had been called off. When did you hear about that cancellation? That same day. Well, that must have been very frustrating for you after all that training and preparation. So, Mr. Beauty, you've been fight training for 3 hours prior to arriving at Mr. Riding's, and then you proceed to fight for 2 more hours with your friends via the medium of computer games. What did you do next? You and your friends decided it was time to get a taxi. This taxi took you directly into the town centre, in fact, straight to Cinder's wine bar. And it is here that you see the defendant, Mr. Charming, for the first time. Is that right? Now, you told the court earlier that you got into a conversation with Mr. Charming at the bar. Can you tell us in more detail what that conversation was about? Just chit-chat. Who initiated this chit-chat? You? Are you in the habit of regularly talking to complete strangers in bars? You noticed his wallet and commented on it. Why was that? It bore the logo of the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And that was the end of the conversation between you? No. Why? You also talked about the Anthony Joshua fight that was happening that same night. Tell me, Mr. Beauty, what were you wearing? How would you describe the fit of that blue shirt and those jeans? Well fitted. What others might call tight fitting. So your clothes that night meant your muscles were very visible. This outfit that you wore out to town that showed off your fighter's physique so well, was it the same outfit that you were wearing when you arrived at Mr. Riding's house? No. Okay, let us come to later in the evening at the Ever After nightclub, where you meet the defendant for a second time. Can you describe this meeting? You recognized Mr. Charming from Cinder's, and once again, you initiated a conversation. You initiated a conversation. Can you recall how long your conversation went on for? No? Your Honour, if it pleases the court, may we play video evidence reference A6, the CCTV footage from the bar of the Ever After nightclub? Mr. Beauty, can you tell me the timestamp at the moment you begin to speak with Mr. Charming? 11:30 p.m. So we are now some 6.5 hours on from the first time you began drinking high-strength beer at Mr. Riding's, and 4 hours on from when you arrived in the town centre to continue that drinking. How much have you had to drink by this point? You're unsure? Well, looking at this video, you seem to need to significantly steady yourself against the bar. Watching now, in the cold light of day, Would you describe yourself as quite heavily inebriated at this point? And how does consuming alcohol to this level normally affect you and your judgment? Not at all, really, Mr. Beauty. Mr. Riding, your friend, testified that when under the influence of alcohol, you often become very reckless. Do you disagree? You suppose on occasions your behaviour could appear to others to be risky. Let's go back to the CCTV. What is happening here at 11:35 p.m? You're removing your jacket. Why did you decide to do that at that particular moment? You entered the club at 11, so why a full half hour later, whilst in conversation with Mr. Charming, did you choose to remove this piece of clothing? Is it because you wanted him to be able to get a better look at your body in that tight-fitting blue shirt? And it clearly seems to be working, doesn't it? At 11:45, is that not both you, what would the colloquial term be, flexing your pecs for one another at the bar? How do you explain this friendly exchange of clear mutual attraction for each other's musculature? It was just banter, light-hearted conversation. And at 11:55, you take Mr. Charming's phone and input something into it. What is that, Mr. Beauty? The defendant told you he was unhappy at his boxing gym, so you gave him the details of yours. But why did you also add your phone number to that information? Mr. Beauty, isn't it true that during this second conversation, you told Mr. Charming that you were envious of Anthony Joshua getting to fight that night, that your own amateur boxing bout had just that day been cancelled, that you loved getting roughed up, and so you were now, in your words, gagging for a scrap? And yet you want us to believe that just 25 minutes later, outside the Ever After, Mr. Charming launched a vicious, unprovoked attack on you, fracturing your skull, breaking your jaw and ribs, and puncturing one of your lungs, from flirting fighter at the bar to blameless victim in an alley in less than half an hour? Your actions throughout the afternoon and into the evening of February 14th were of a man who revels in violence, indeed spends much of his spare time actively engaged in some aspect of fighting. You were no naive innocent. What you were, like many men your age out on a Friday night, was simply frustrated with a fighting itch that was in need of being scratched. And I put it to you that on noticing my client's wallet with that UFC logo emblazoned on it at Cinder's Wine Bar, your judgment, alcohol impaired, and your risk taker awakened, you set your sights on Mr. Charming, following him to Ever After, where you deliberately and calculatingly set about befriending him with the sole intention of getting him to fight with you. You struck up conversation with him for a second time, again about fighting. You removed your jacket to show off your boxer's physique in the revealing outfit you had purposefully taken the time to change into before heading into town. You even set the seed that this thing between you could have some longevity by suggesting your boxing club as an alternative to his, going so far as to give your telephone number. And it was you that invited Mr. Charming outside for a quick and dirty little brawl, wasn't it, Mr. Beauty? That's the real reason you didn't scream for help. You wanted to be there. You initiated and willingly engaged in consensual fighting with Mr. Charming, and it was only after the fact, when your friends found you bloodied and battered in that alleyway, having lost so comprehensively to a better fighter, that you got embarrassed and concocted this fairy tale to save your tattered ego. No further questions, Your Honour. What are you saying, little ones? That can't be it. You want to know who they decided was at fault. Well, no one that you've met thus far, no parties in this tale, to find the answers that you seek. You'll have to look outside this book. I merely tell the tales as request. I've told them time and time again, I can weave a different yarn. But no, they say, we like these familiar tales of old. Let us wallow in these fairy stories, tell our beauties that to be safe from charming, just be good. And when a few are sacrificed to realities of brutalities as we know they will be, let us give context to violence, blame and shame to assuage our guilt. No, little ones, if you want to find the fault, go ask the adults in your life. And when they seek reason for your questions, tell them that the storyteller sent you. And this is what she said. In your collective silent compliance, you asked for it. For weeks, I avidly research MS and conclude that the problem I have is that my expert is not expert enough. I put in a request to be seen at a leading urology hospital in London where the consultants are also academics who have their names plastered across the papers I have been reading. This'll do it, I think to myself as I make my way through the dingiest hospital I have ever been in. It has been 4 floors, 2 lifts and several corridors since I last saw daylight. As I reach my destination, I'm directed to sit with the other patients on a line of chairs in the corridor outside the consultant's office, like a naughty pupil waiting for the punishment of a headmaster. Mrs. Young, what you need to understand is that we know how to fix your liver and kidneys, but we do not know how to fix your multiple sclerosis. Morag, can I call you Morag? Your MS is very aggressive and very efficient. Normally I'd expect to see tens of brain and spinal lesions for the damage you have, and you only have 2. My inner hyperachiever sneaks a proud smile. If a job's worth doing. Yet even in its current state of malfunction, my body is still screaming at me, this is not the way. Do not play Russian roulette with your vital organs. I found some information about a treatment from a Brazilian urologist using high doses of vitamin D for 20 years with more than 30,000 patients, and over 80% of those have been put into remission. Snake oil, absolute internet snake oil. Yes, the vitamin D has a part to play, but not on that scale. And there is absolutely no clinical trial evidence of its efficacy. This treatment that I'm offering you is trialed and effective at slowing down the progression in up to 30% of cases. And we must slow things down without delay. Taken on a wider view, I think the benefits outweigh the risks. The wider view. It's an interesting term. His wider view is as wide as the life cycle of a degenerative neurological condition. My wider view encompasses loved ones thinking about starting a family, unfulfilled career and personal dreams. My wider view is visceral, potent, heart and belly achingly vibrant. His wider view is killing mine. And I realize in that moment that whilst he may be the expert in studying this disease, I am the expert living with it. Chasms, divides, splits, differences of opinion, whatever you want to call them, happen everywhere. They can be so vast that they appear to make the river of change uncrossable. And when faced with rivers, what we need are bridges. She hates heights. Standing on a chair makes her feel queasy, which makes this choice to attend an aerial obstacle course interesting. She realises this as the 16-year-old Saturday kid checks her harness. The metal of the carabiners cold to her touch. She checks them often, a comforting amount of often for someone who is terrified yet not entertaining the notion of turning back. High in the Scottish hills, skyscraper pine trees surround them. Between them and where they need to be dangles one of the longest zip lines in the UK, a mere 45 meters above the valley floor. Where they need to be is so far away, she cannot see where they will land. The only signal that her friends are making it across is the anonymous voice periodically bellowing out of the 16-year-old's crackling walkie-talkie. Clear, next one, good to go. She stands, waits her turn, and works out that she will be okay on this first obstacle because there is enough time. Enough for her to feel the satisfying sensation of the harness groping her backside, letting her know that it has her, before the land beneath her runs out and her dangling body is propelled high into nothingness. Bloody hell! The view's immense up here. Reality whizzes past her faster and faster. She smiles, a deep, satisfying, full body smile. This is why she does it, for that joyful shot of adrenaline that lights up every nerve ending. Shots that only come when a fear boundary is crossed. In this fleeting moment, she is as alive as it is possible to be. The group powers on high above the forest floor. The deep fragrance of fallen pine needles waft up from below, reminding them that they are in places they absolutely should not be. They cheer themselves through the obstacles connecting the canopies, wooden rope bridges, challenging cargo nets, almost too tight tunnels, screeching swings. All of them allow the harness to speak its safety before it's too late. They are up there for hours, navigating the physical structures that connect tree to tree, time on fast forward. Then suddenly, without the courtesy of warning, there is a drastic slowing of consciousness as they approach the penultimate obstacle. It is different. She doesn't need to reach it to know this. She can tell by the queue gathering before it, like pilgrims waiting to kneel in front of a long trekked for altar. A message is passed back from their intrepid leader down the line, a Chinese whisper of adventure. All right, loves, this next one looks like a complete fucker. Giggles subside, an act of respect. Silence. They are captivated, watching intently their preceding pilgrims attempting to make the journey, brains whirring, struggling to work out why this obstacle has generated such a quagmire of sticky, strong emotion, stopping them, rooting them to the spot, unable to commit. Finally, she is close enough to see it, a sheep in wolf's clothing. Starting from a platform far higher than any they have been on today, the traveller must jump straight into dead air and fall, and continue falling, and continue falling, until the line goes tight and bounces them upwards with the comforting uptake of that harness hug before swinging them towards their next stop. This is an obstacle with no pre-commitment safety check. It is a leap of faith. And now it's her turn. The silence is overwhelming. She inches forward until her toes are poking over the boundary between solid wooden platform and extremely flimsy air. Her heart beats so mightily, it risks tearing her chest wide open. Then it starts. A barely perceptible voice inside her head. Let's do this. Let's do this. Cycling and bouncing around her skull. It expands until it spills over and out of her mouth into the world. Come on. Come on, an involuntary mantra of burgeoning courage repeated under her breath. It grows, takes on a life of its own and spreads until voices are coming from friends and strangers everywhere. Yes, come on, you've got this. A cacophony of vivid vocal encouragement wraps itself around her, gathering momentum, creating her path from fear to fearlessness, from inaction to action. A physical structure joining her from here to there is no longer required. The words themselves are building the bridge. The words are the bridge. She steps forward and falls free. I bloody love watching those reality documentary shows where civilians are tasked with experiencing life in the military. On the days when fatigue means I can't get up from the sofa, I binge watch them. My favourite are the US Marines. They're just so damn enthusiastic, responding to everything with a loud and proud, "Hoorah, sir!" It takes me several episodes to realise that this is more than just a generic woohoo sound, and that what they are actually saying is HUA, heard, understood, acknowledged, hoo-yah. To be fair, I grew up on British war films where a considered Roger that is about as affirmative as we get, which rather perfectly sums up our differences. Americans' rousing, efficient acronym, Brits' quiet double entendre. Anyway, it's now been well over a year since my diagnosis and I'm at a personal development retreat. All the information has been telling me to reduce my stress, to get out of my head, and well, it's not going well. I like living in my head. So at lunch, I sit with the wisest and most embodied woman I've met so far and ask her advice. This is what she says. Talk to your MS. I don't say what I think, British. Instead, I ask, how exactly do I do that? Get 2 chairs, sit on the first, start the conversation as you, get up, sit on the other chair and let MS answer you. Go back and forth until you're done. I go home, I do not talk to my MS. Several weeks pass until during a particularly rubbish few days alone whilst my husband is travelling for work, I find myself preparing seating arrangements. It's a horrible, awkward, stilted first date. Hi, how are you? Fine, you? Yeah, good. How's the weather been with you? Much the same as with you, I'd imagine. I mean, pulling teeth, painful, until there's nothing left but to ask it. Why are you here? What the fuck did I do to deserve this? And before my ass can make contact with MS's chair, she seethes through gritted teeth. You didn't fucking listen. Hand on heart, can I say that I am in no way responsible for my disease? No, I can't. Different for others, but no, I can't. The warnings were sent over the years and I ignored them. I doubled down on playing the game, getting the job, the house, the mortgage, the marriage, doing everything I had been told I was supposed to do. But MS was right. What I didn't ever do was really listen. The first time I ever experienced hoo-yah in person for myself was when I was 17. I was asked to helm the tall ship I had just joined out of Newcastle, along the Tyne and into the North Sea. We were mainly all rookies on board, so various briefings were given before setting out, one of which was that when at the helm, it is vital to always acknowledge the captain's instructions. What they didn't tell us was how to acknowledge it. So when he fired back through the biting wind, 5 degrees starboard, my nonchalant teenager replied, "Yep." Instantly, the second mate is by my side. He is everything you expect a lifetime seafarer to be, right down to the big white beard and the tan leather thick skin. Yep. The response, Evans, is yes, sir, 5 degrees starboard. Don't be so bloody lazy with your words. Well, I yes-sir'd the heck out of the rest of that trip. And boy, did we go some places. My schooling in yes, hoo-yah was complete and embedded. The problem is that a yes, hoo-yah It's like using your words to build a bridge, only to watch as you get to the other side, the road branch out into multiple lanes, each with a booth, and you realise, shit, this is a toll bridge. And now you're scrabbling around in your car for your wallet, thankful that it has money in it when you find it. You make your payment, grateful to be continuing your journey, and you forget that there are still people left behind on the other side of the water, and they don't have the funds to cross. When we turn off emotion and who are only the yeses given to us by power and their experts that study, we are hearing, listening, and acknowledging something. We are building a bridge, but that bridge is not free. How do we make the bridges free? How about together? Because when did we get so fixed on doing it alone? When did that become a badge of honour for a species that is inherently DNA coded tribal in nature? I have a friend who calls her competitors potential collaborators. Think about that for a moment. Capitalism, commerciality, competition programs us to say rubbish, to believe there isn't enough for everyone to go around. Resources are scarce, they say. What a handy little prison of not enough that leaves us all in. Nature, though, is wise and a knowing mother, the kind who regularly gives you a withering look as she says, well, I haven't done it for no reason. She gives us exactly what we need, and what she has given us that she has not given any other animal is the power to imagine. A power so strong that all I have to say is nails raking down a chalkboard or sucking lemons dry, and your body reacts. Our ability to imagine allows us to stand in the shoes of another, to suspend our own animalistic responses enough to stop and listen. It is next level communication. And we are the only ones who have it. So why do we repeatedly get pulled back to arguments about other species in the animal kingdom and how survival of the fittest is how we should do things? What if there is more than enough, but the only way to access it is if we work together rather than battling to pull each other apart? So how do we build free bridges? We use the most complete and world-changing sentence we have at our disposal. No. Imagine if we taught everyone to give this one word show-stopping respect and reverence, that the moment you hear it, you instinctually know you have a responsibility, a moral duty to put down what you're doing and seek to understand and acknowledge it. Because to not hoo-yah the shit out of someone's no would be like publishing a report that says a country isn't institutionally racist within the same year that tens of thousands of its people took to the streets to say that their lived experience says otherwise. It would be like not all men being the trending hashtag in the same week that women have flooded social media with their lived experience of fear in response to a woman being abducted and murdered by a policeman as she tried to walk home at night. It would be like saying that our children are growing up the safest they have ever been when thousands of them are anonymously posting to an online site about the harassment and worse they have suffered at the hands of their peers. Abuse that is happening before they have even reached the age of consent, in the place that is meant to educate. I could go on. Child poverty, rising male suicide, on, but really, how many societal brain lesions do we need before we start to fucking listen like the animals we are? Hearing, understanding, acknowledging another's no isn't passive. It isn't an act of capitulation or weakness. It's the act of deep communication that our species has been built for. In nature's continued wisdom, it is from the polarity of disagreement that this bridge will form. If we each stand on our opposite shores and in turn speak and listen and speak and listen over and over again across the chasm that divides us, just as magnets need opposite poles to attract, so too we will be drawn ever closer together, the words forming the bridge underneath our feet, until finally we meet on a fully formed structure we can all cross at no charge. Annual checkups pass. Each one of the MRI tells the same. The patient's MS is radiologically and clinically inactive. So, Mrs. Young, I'll see you next year? Actually, Doc, meeting up with you on the regular is becoming the most stressful part of this diagnosis. So I was thinking we could maybe leave it. I'll just carry on living my life. And if something bad happens, I'll call you. Oh, no, I don't like that. I need to keep monitoring so I can put you on a drug treatment if anything changes. Don't you mean you'll let me know what drugs are available so I can decide which one, if any, to take? And so it would seem I had heard Dr. B, but it had taken me 5 years to understand him. 2 weeks later, the consultant's letter arrives, and it begins for the first time ever with the statement, patient medication, high dose vitamin D. And so it would seem that I am not the only one hoo-yaring the shit out of this disease. Our time together is drawing to a close, but before I go, every good tale should have an epilogue. And here is mine for Debbie. I have thought about changing my name often. A life plagued with a slightly unusual name and all the random nicknames and pronunciations that go with it is a deeply frustrating one, punctuated with occasional comedic moments. Meeting Americans is my favourite. There must be something about the accent interplay that skews the response. Hi, I'm Morg. Nice to meet you. Morg? What an unusual name. Lovely to meet you too. I always pause for a few beats, waiting for them to catch up with what they have just said. Sometimes it's long enough for me to imagine that scenario of the day of my birth, my parents unsure what to call me, before looking up to see a bland hospital department sign screwed to the corridor wall, mortuary, inspiringly written beneath maternity. But the penny never drops. I become used to the fact that only my immediate family members can pronounce my name properly. To be fair, I stopped correcting people when I was 10. It's a new school year, which means new teachers, which means this conversation has to be had again, this time in the first English class of the year. Morag Evans, yeah, miss, I'm here, but actually my name is pronounced Morag, not Morag. She stares at me before irritation flushes red across her face and determination enters her eyes. No, it is not. It is a traditional Scottish name, and I am saying it correctly. I am the language teacher here. Do not be disruptive, Morag. I can feel my classmates perform a collective eye roll behind me on my behalf, but in that moment, I have been silenced for 29 years. My Aunt Sheila was something else. It was impossible to feel either a stranger or unloved in her home. No matter what time of day you arrived, there would be homemade soup on the stove and a cake freshly baked. If you left her house, hungry or sober, it would be your own damn fault. Sheila had a personality that could fill not just the room, but the whole neighbourhood. Mother to 5 and a manager in the local department store, she seemed to know everyone and embraced them all with love and kindness. Family, community were crucially important to her. Her house, with its open door policy, bustled with energy. She was deeply tribal in the best meaning of the word. 6 months ago, after yet another bloody frustrating conversation about my name, I call my mother and in desperation finally ask, why? Why did you call me Morag and why do you pronounce it differently? No one says it properly. There's a brief silence before she says, it was your Aunt Sheila's middle name. She always said it that way. We all did. Everyone in our family has always pronounced it Morag. I don't understand why people don't seem to be able to say it. And neither do I. Forget the rag and imagine looking at a book with the rooks off and the K to a G. Morag. I love my family pronunciation. When a stranger gets it right, my breath stops. I have been seen entirely anew as the woman I am. My name is key to where I am from. As the new year kicks in, I send a message to my friends, the ones who use nicknames. It is time to leave. Mog, Moggy, Marge, Ruggs in 2020. And slowly, I begin the process of reclaiming and honouring my heritage. The X-ray is placed against the light and the cancer screams out the film, tens of white spots all through his lungs. You don't need to be any kind of expert to know that this is unrecoverable. My husband and I look at each other across the small white sterile vet's room. No conversation needed. Can we go for a final walk and bring him back in a few hours? And so we take Bailey, our black Labrador, with his brother Branston, the German Shepherd, to the park we have been taking them for over a decade. Where should we put him after? I quietly ask my husband as the sun begins to drop below the horizon. Somewhere that will always be here, somewhere undestroyable, somewhere we can always visit. And so we head to the Heather Garden, a beautiful section of the park we are in, the Queen's Park, Windsor Great Park. As the cool spring night closes in, we open the gate, ignoring for the first time ever the dogs on lead sign. Bailey has been carrying his favourite blue toy for the whole of the walk. I bend down and whisper, right, Bubba, over to you. Pick your 4 favourite spots. And so the 3 of us wander behind him as he meanders through this beautiful garden. He stops and drops his toy 3 times before finding a comfortable mossy blanket under a tree where he drops it for the final 4th time and lies down. He has made his choices. A couple of weeks later, we come back to this same garden early as the sun is rising and the morning hustle has not yet commenced. We scatter him at each of the places he has chosen in the order he chose them, before finally settling on the same moss he had found so comforting. We sip champagne from one of those ridiculous bottles for one and eat a banana each. My husband hates the end of a banana. You know, that hard bit with black in the middle where banana joins to skin? He calls it the bananus. Nobody else in our little family of 4 will eat the bananas, apart from Bailey, who would come running from another room in the house the moment he heard the split of the banana peel. And so we eat our bananas and sip our champagne from the bottle, each quietly removing the bananas and dropping it to the ground for Bubba. And we notice that as we've been sitting here, the most incredible force of nature has occurred around us. We have been completely encircled by pheasants and rabbits and squirrels and blackbirds, pigeons, robins, and not one but 2 red kites soar directly above us. It's as if the whole garden has come out to welcome Bailey to his new home. 2 years have passed and the Bailey Loop continues to be regularly navigated on our walks, each of the 4 places he picked making more and more sense as the year travels through the seasons, revealing the beauty that each possesses. I navigate my way through the dark hospital corridors, looking for signs of the ward she is in. Finally, I find it. I go to push the heavy wood wired glass window door, but it won't open. I push again, nothing. It takes me several seconds to realise it is locked. I am 13 years old and I have never been to a hospital where they lock the doors. I didn't know they were even allowed to do that. I press the intercom and a gruff nurse enters. I am in visiting hours, so I'm permitted entry. Charlie has a room of her own. I'm taken to it. When I finally see her, I have to hide the shock on my face. I have been spending every weekday seeing her identical twin sister Pip at school. Charlie didn't come back after the summer. We all arrived ready for the new term, but she, we were told, was unwell. Her recovery could be long. Charlie and I have been writing incessantly to one another since that point. Our letters are filled with gossip about school, our favourite music, how dreamy Brad Pitt is, how much she is struggling to fight her illness, how depressed she is, how no one understands, how she thinks about taking her life. When we are not writing, we talk on the phone in the evenings, completely negating the point of our letters, which will often arrive with news already conveyed on the phone. Sometimes she is chatty, upbeat. Other times she rages down the line about how shit everything is. Every now and again, she cannot even bring herself to speak. I ask if she wants me to hang up. No, stay. Can you just chat? I'll listen. I don't want to be on my own. But this is the first time I have seen her, and anorexia has ravaged her body. I am overcome with the urge to rip the flesh off my bones and give it to her. Charlie is the first person to show me what love in friendship looks and feels like. She fights the demons of her disease throughout GCSEs. This will not be the last eating disorder unit that I visit her in. We continue to write, but as I go to university, we begin to lose touch. The letters get less from us both until there are no more. In 2008, we reconnect on Facebook, but never at the same level as the teenagers in us did. And it will be via Facebook 5 months ago and over 2 decades since her fight began that I will find out that she is finally at peace. I feel compelled to dig out photos of our time at school, and as I do, I come across a pack of envelopes held together with string. It is every letter she ever sent me, every past note in a school class, every doodle she drew. And I realise that despite the fact that we lost touch, Charlie will forever be my answer to the question, who was your childhood best friend? All right then, beautiful morning today, isn't it? I take a seat on the handmade wooden bench overlooking the lake. I love this spot. It's hidden away with one of the best views in the park, but close enough to the takeout van for my hot chocolate to still be warm by the time I've walked to it. I come here often. Ben is very good company, 4 years younger than me and a Royal Marine. He has had to listen to many of my ponderings over the years. Even when I walk around the lake and spot his bench from the other side of the water, I'll give him a little nod of recognition. It is only as I begin to research this story that I even think to Google him. It is with deep regret that the Ministry of Defence must confirm the death of Marine Benjamin Reddy from K Company 42 Commando Royal Marines in Afghanistan on Tuesday, the 6th of March, 2007. Marine Reddy, aged 22, was killed when his unit came under fire during a deliberate clearance operation in the Kajaki area of Helmand province. Beneath the statement, a picture of Ben, steely grey blue eyes, the most amazing platinum blonde hair and eyebrows I have ever seen, and the kind of smile that you know yielded him success in charm offences. But the headline that really captures my attention: Queen's sympathy for her gardener as his hero's son dies in Afghanistan. It turns out that Ben grew up living in this park. His dad, one of the people who has tended it for years, who has made it somewhere that will always be here, somewhere undestroyable, somewhere we can always visit. When I think about story inspiration, I'm not going to lie, a wills and probates solicitor is not the top of my list. But Debbie is so bloody passionate about what she does that as I listen, the pieces of a picture come thick and fast. I hear her and feel compelled to sit down and start to write this story. And as I do, I begin to understand. I understand that legacy is not something you only leave after you die. We get fooled into believing it because the moment of passing, that moment of loss, makes the memory so much stronger. But legacy is life, not death. It has a living force of its own. It is the most amazing lace tapestry being woven every day by every person in myriad ways, some infinitesimally small, others gargantuan. It binds us all together and does not care if we are family or strangers, or if we are divided in time by days or years, or even divided by species. In truth, I have no line of sight to the legacies I have left for others. None of us do. I can only see the ones I have been gifted. But I could expand the legacy web that surrounds me 100 times over from the ones I have just shared, and I haven't yet lived 40 years. I'm reminded of being 12 years old in a science lesson at school, being taught the basic laws of physics, one of which every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So on the days when the world feels too much, sit down and write your legacy gifts and see that as you have received, so too you must have given. Today, you may not be changing the world, but unless you have been living alone under a rock your whole damn life, you have undoubtedly already changed somebody's world. Well, folks, that's us at the end of our journey for this evening. Thank you so much for joining me for the ride.
She's good.
How are we all doing?
It's amazing, Maura. I'm really moved. Really.
Yeah, I might have something in my eye.
That last one's a kicker. I said to my husband, I'm like, I've been practicing, like trying to almost desensitize myself to it. Because no matter where I did it, I always started crying, but always in a different place. From a presenter's point of view, you're like, no, this is the place I should breathe. This is the place I should stop. It's like, no, this gets me every time. Right, okay, crack on.
You should tell us to come with tissues next time.
Yeah.
I'm glad I can pronounce your name okay though, Maura.
Yes, but yeah.
Oh, I just did it wrong.
You wouldn't have been forgiven, would you?
I would not have been forgiven, no. That would be a bit harsh. Oh no, excellent, thank you.
Cracking second album, Maura. Amazing.
Thank you very much.
It was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here.
Done a year of Zoom, haven't we all? and I haven't felt more human and more connected and more moved in the whole year. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome, Lucy. Thank you. Oh, wow. It's so lovely seeing so many faces.
You've achieved the impossible, Morag. You've rendered me speechless.
Yay, well done.
That's it, Sharon.
So, Morag, will there be more?
So demanding, Linda.
It's so amazing. It's so amazing. I hope you will do more, and I hope you let us know.
I hope there will be more. Like when I meet more Debbies.
Yeah.
They prompt all the stuff to happen. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. Like each time it's, like last time when it was just the standalone, and this time I kind of challenged myself, can I create something that is, goes on and is more complete and not just like, this is the first, this is the second.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I discovered why I didn't do that the first time. It's really hard.
Well, you did it beautifully this time.
Beautifully. But yeah, it's fun. I'm enjoying it, so I think there will be more.
I'm imagining you in a quirky little theatre on a stool.
Yeah, that's the bit now with Zoom that's becoming a bit, and it's so funny because I don't know if you've ever seen those YouTube videos where they show like the Instagram influencers, and it's like a behind the scenes thing, and it's normally like a boyfriend or a husband running around doing all sorts of tech things with lights to make their natural image, look natural. And I now have a husband with tech skills, and lights have arrived and microphones have arrived, and I was a bit like, I don't know what you want me to do with these. But it was this time, like you say, you feel like, oh, it would be nice if I could have done something with backgrounds, and little theatre, that'd be quite cool.
You don't need any of those things. You have
No.
such an amazing gift. You just come as you are. You could wear a sack and be, I don't know, wherever. It's absolute magic.
Do you know, this reminds me of, and I'm giving a wee bit of my age away here, the days of Spike Milligan. And oh God, there's so many of them and that's all they would do was sit in a chair and they would deliver this beautiful poetry and prose, and it was completely captivating, and we lost that art. It's not something that we slow down enough, so that you're bringing that back is, for me, is very reminiscent of a very special part of my childhood. And I think there's so much value in it for all of us to be able to sit and absorb that. So hell yeah, we're doing this again, women.
Yeah, the timelines between creation are getting a bit less as well, because I think last time when it was like, when are you going to do it again? In my head, I thought, Jesus, it took 8 months. And like this time, it's like, okay, that took slightly less time. So now hopefully the process means that it continues to take slightly less time. But it's quite nice even just creating it, right? Being in it while it's bubbling into something.
Yeah.
But listening to you is like a multi-sensory experience. It's captivating on so many different levels. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for explaining who you are. What's the film? Somebody tell me, what's the film where I'm picturing an aging American actor, and he says it repeatedly through the film like a kind of memory.
A Few Good Men.
Nicholson, isn't it? Jack Nicholson in something, isn't it?
It's a few good men.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah, that's it. I had no idea it was about that when I was watching.
I personally prefer woo, like I get very enthusiastic. I was like, oh no, it means something. Okay, right.
I had no idea, so thank you for that. You were amazing, Morag. Really amazing.
Thanks, Karen.
Very proud of you as a fellow storyteller. You have come on leaps and bounds. I think your teacher would be proud.
I think so. She's pretty ace, isn't she?
So proud, so proud. That's why I'm not saying anything. Oh my God, I'm so moved. Just to have seen the whole journey and to have heard these stories bubbling up, and how what you've done here is what you're talking about, right? You are building those bridges, and you're not doing it by yourself, because your own stories have been inspired. Like, I remember that conversation about legacy with Debbie, and the first time we talked about fairy tales, and then you came back with that epic, mind-blowing story, and we all just sat there for 15 minutes like, whoa. And then it opened up so many conversations and places people hadn't gone to before. And yeah, to see you just diving in, like a year ago you didn't even call yourself a storyteller, and here you are, like the best storyteller in the world. I'm going to just say it. I'm going to name you the best storyteller in the world.
Oh, bless you.
Amazing.
Well, I've got my G&T. I don't know if any of you have resorted to alcohol.
Give you some wine.
That's very well deserved. And just to talk for an hour like that is just amazing. Just the delivery and everything was just an absolute delight to watch. Just a real treat.
Yeah, I had a moment, you know, when you see it and you see all these pages and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to get good with the editing. We're going to be here for quite some time. And that legacy story, like I think I said to Kate, I've got this story and it's like, it's great, but it's heartbreaking because there were so many, like, when you actually think about it, that's what I loved, because it made me think about all of these different people who had gifted me something, and some of them I didn't even know their name. So I've been writing it, and then you have this horrible, like, oh, that's just for me then. It's going to get, you know, edited and moved. But yeah, but I highly recommend, you know, sitting there one day and just thinking about that kind of similar dynamic, because I was kind of blown away when I started thinking about it, of all of the different people that I could think of. Yeah,
that legacy thing is so beautiful. I'm just thinking, Morag, as well, when you, because we, lots of us are coaches, aren't we, and talk about what will your legacy be, and you're right, we talk about it as if it's something that will come into existence on the day we die. And as well, I love the way you described the bridge of words to someone else, but also just strikes me that in our lifetime we're creating the bridge back to ourselves when we die.
Yeah, and Debbie, when she talks about it, she's brilliant. She talks about like such enthusiasm, right? She said, well, you know, she's starting off with this sort of, I do wills and probates, but really I'm interested in and I've got this grief group. She said, and the thing is, because there's this legacy cycle and there's this connection, and she suddenly starts to talk about like there's 4 pillars, and your who you're connected to is like your ancestors, and so there's this whole section of you that happens before you've even happened, kind of thing. And then she's like, then there's what you create for your life when you're here. And then there's how you celebrate someone's life in their death. And then there's how you curate what they've left behind. And she just has this really beautiful way of describing it. And like, you know, when you meet somebody and they do that and you're like, never thought about it like that at all, you know, and they just kind of blow your brain apart. Yeah, that's what Debbie did. She's quite something to kind of get her in her zone of genius talking about it.
No, it's beautiful.
Where is Debbie? Did she know she was going to be playing such a prominent part in your story?
I sent her, do you remember? She had this conversation saying about these 4 things, and immediately, like I say, I was like, oh, I've got that story and that story and that story. And because she was so integral to it, I sent her a message like, I've got this story that I want to write, and it's, you know, like about you, and would that be okay? And I'll share it with you. And obviously if you don't like it, then, you know, I won't share it any further. And you know how you send something and like, please say yes. You know, because if you turn around now, like, no, I don't like that, please don't share that.
Damn.
Well, lovely people, I will leave you to your Friday evenings, and thank you so much for coming and being my second album audience.
Well done. That was brilliant.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and
It
cheers.
was amazing, Morag.
Thank you.
Bye.
Amazing. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye everyone.